morning. This is day 2 of Bad Camp, and this is my talk on creating an AI chatbot in Drupal the easy way. What I mean by the easy way is no code required. So let's get into it. First, an introduction. I'm Jordan. I've been working with Drupal for about 19 years now. Front end, back end, DevOps, all the things, and most recently AI. I have my own website which has a demonstration chatbot on it, Koplowicz so you can go there, you can ask it questions if something's not clear here, but you can also ask me questions too. So what are we going to go over today? These slides are out of order. That's okay. All right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go over some basics of just like the conceptual building blocks that you're going to need to build your own chatbot. We're going to talk about vendor and model, vector database. Show of hands if you know what a vector database is. Okay, great. Well, we'll talk a little bit about what that is, and not too much detail though. An agent, and then adding on the chatbot on top of everything. So it's okay if these terms don't really make sense to you yet, because we're going to explain them in pretty basic detail. Not a lot of detail, rather. Caveats before I continue. And now, I've given this talk before. It was about 6 months ago. This was more true back then than it is now, but it is absolutely still true. First warning is the AI hallucinates. So you're about to build an AI chatbot. You're going to rely on it to talk to your visitors or your customers or whoever your audience is. The AI is going to make stuff up. It's not 100% reliable. There are things you can do to counteract that, but you also have to keep it in mind. Another example is you can't do math. This is, and there's a really good reason for that. It's because this is generative AI. What generative means is it means it was trained on a bunch of content, and now you're asking it for something, and what it's going to give you is something similar to what it has seen before, right? So if you ask it a math problem, it's seen math problems. 2 plus 2 equals 4, 4 plus 4 equals 8. What's 2 plus 2? I don't know, maybe 8. It's a number. You know, so it's not actually doing math. It's just trying to produce something that it thinks is similar to what it's seen before. And then the final warning is this is not all free open source. In the Drupal world, just about everything is free and open source software. And that's a wonderful, beautiful thing, which I love very much. It's what powers the entire Drupal community, and it's a great thing. But for this, you're going to have to get out a credit card. That is avoidable. If you wanted to self-host, you could do that. That was what my talk yesterday was about, but that's a lot harder. So to do this the easy way, no code required, credit card is required.
If you want, they can use the Amazing IO.
They could use Amazing IO, yes. And I really should add a slide for that, but we should talk. Okay, here's a little diagram of, sorry, in case the microphone didn't pick up the comment is, there's a provider out there called Amazing.io. They have an AI offering that is quite robust. I just got a taste of today. Unfortunately, none of that is in my talk. I might have to give another talk and update it. But this is the lay of the land. This is what you're going to need in order to add a chatbot to your website. I'm going to use, can you see if I'm using the mouse pointer here? No, it's not showing up. Oh yeah, it is, right? A little bit? And if I wiggle that, does it do anything? Yeah, okay, it's on the screen, great. Okay, so I'm just going to start. Basic here is you need a lamp stack. Raise your hand if you know what a lamp stack is. Everybody does, great. Different examples, local environment, DDEV, managed hosts like Pantheon would work just fine. Yesterday I kind of was mean to Pantheon and said multiple times that, well, this won't work on Pantheon or Acquia. And yesterday that was true, but for this, you can absolutely do all of this on a managed host. This is the easy way. Or you can, if you're doing some sort of fancier containerized thing with Kubernetes, that would work too. But as long as you have your lamp stack in there. Obviously you need Drupal. Drupal comes with a MySQL, requires a MySQL database. It doesn't come with a database. Your lamp stack comes with a database. Drupal requires that. And then, of course, there's going to be some contrib modules in there. Next to that, you're going to need a vector database. We're going to talk in a minute about what that is and what makes it different. But for now, just suffice it to say, it's a different database. This is what the AI uses. It doesn't use the same type of database that Drupal does. I picked a provider called Pinecone. I'm going to give opinionated recommendations in this talk. These are not the only providers by any means. There's a lot of different options out there that you can use. This is the one I happen to use, that's all. Same thing with your agent. I'm using OpenAI. In particular, I like GPT-4o. There's newer models out there. There's other providers. Some of them are arguably better. This is just the one I happen to use. And that's the one I'm going to use in my demonstration. And then finally, you're going to need to put a chatbot on top of that. There's a contrib module for that. In fact, we're going to use the AI module. And then you're going to place a Drupal block on your page as the final step. Everybody knows what a Drupal block is, right? Yes, okay, great. I'm seeing lots of nods. And that's it, that's the architecture. So what do you need to make this all work? Well, the first thing you're going to need is the AI module. Now, the last time I gave this talk, I was really excited because the AI module had been around for less than a year, and it had already started to get a bunch of traction. I was in, when was Stanford WebCamp? May, June? So right around here. Since then, what's happened is it's taken off even more by a lot. And in particular, you have this 1.1 branch has gotten really popular. That's important because 1.1 is different from 1.0 in terms of the architecture. They changed a little bit of how it works under the hood. So if you've seen this presentation before, it's a little different now. The way in which it's different doesn't matter. I'll tell you. AI agents wasn't there before. That's a new module that got added in. It's part of the ecosystem now. Hey, come on in, have a seat. We're just talking about what you need, like the different pieces that you're going to need to build a chatbot. So the first thing you're going to need, you have your Drupal site, you've installed it on your web host or your local environment or whatever. You're going to need the AI module. And I was just talking about how exciting it is, how popular this module has gone. And of course, anybody who's been at Bad Camp today or yesterday knows that all the conversations are about AI, and they're all about the AI module. This has really become the ecosystem through, and it's not 100%, but the vast majority of work on Drupal in the AI space is happening in and around the AI module. Okay, enough about that. We're going to need this module. We're going to need a few other modules, something called the AI provider module for OpenAI, another one for Pinecone, which is your vector database. You're going to need the key module, and I'm also using Search API. The reason I'm using search, we're not actually setting up a search, but the reason we're using Search API is because it makes it really easy to connect the Drupal database to the vector database, but we'll get there. The one problem with this list is that it's a list, it's complicated, it's not long, but it's not short. If only there was an easier way to do it. Guess what? There is. It's right here. There's a recipe. I made it. Recipes are sort of a new thing in Drupal. They've been around for what, a couple of years actually, well, a year and a half. But we're still sort of forming what recipes can be. Right now, this is a very simple recipe. All it does is it downloads and installs the modules for you. So great. This whole list, you can get it in one step, AI_chatbot_recipe on Drupal.org. There's instructions on how to download and install recipes and use them. And you apply this recipe and you get all those modules downloaded and installed. The bad news is you still have to configure them yourself. We're working on that. There is a feature in recipes now that you can ask questions on the command line or even in a graphical user interface, give the little answers, and then it'll use that to configure all the modules for you. We're not quite there in this recipe yet, but that's the roadmap. What do you do when you have all these modules? Well, standard stuff. You download them, you apply them, you turn them on. In this case, I'm adding a couple extra steps. You can export your configuration. You can use Git to commit that to a file and then push it up. So let's say you have a local environment and you also have Pantheon or Acquia or whomever. You can work locally, you can test this all out locally, iterate, and then when you're confident it's working, you commit your changes and push up to the server. But I mean, this is sort of, even doing it the long way, these are all the steps you need. So far, so good. We're talking, if you're following along at home, you've got a local environment, you've got your modules, they're on. What do you need to make this all work? Well, you need a vendor and you need a model. The vendor that I'm using is OpenAI, which I mentioned before. There's lots of, Anthropic, Google, Meta. I mean, there's so many different companies out there that have AIs that you can use. This is the one I picked. You have to register, and I mentioned this before. This is the part that's not free. You have to give them your credit card. And what you get in exchange, in this case, is an API key. Now, I've heard a lot of talk this last couple days at this conference about using something like Claude Code, which is what, $40 a month? This is not $40 a month. This is $0 a month. When you give them your credit card, you're paying per query. Each query is a fraction of a cent. So yes, it does add up eventually. And if you're not careful and if you don't control the flow of people coming into your website, you could easily get surprised by a $2,000 bill overnight. So you do have to be careful with this. And there are safeguards. You can set a max, you can set a warning, so that when you hit a certain level in your budget, it'll just let you know what's going on, or it'll even just turn off your API so your website stops working, but you also won't get charged. So there are safeguards in there, and it's important to know that. But in a standard month, I pay less than $10 a month, so maybe about $10 a month for this type of API usage, which is a lot less than you would pay for the front-end experience, right? So you use the API, it gets a lot cheaper. This is a screenshot from openai.com. These are the steps you go through. You click on dashboard, you click on API keys, create a new secret key, give it a name, hit the big create button. That's it. You now have a secret key. I didn't actually take a screenshot of that part because I don't want to share my key with everybody. Those keys are very important that you keep them safe and secret. In fact, in some cases, they don't even show you the key. There's just a button to copy it, and then you can paste it in somewhere because they don't even want to display it on your screen. That's how secret they treat these things. But that's it. You get your key, and then you give it to Drupal. And we'll talk about the config for that in a minute. The next ingredient, before we get into the Drupal config, the next ingredient that you're going to need is this vector database. I said I was going to talk about what a vector database is. Now's the perfect time. I love this. So all of these illustrations are AI generated, of course, but I love this one in particular because this is actually, what I did was I asked the AI for a graphical representation of a vector database. And that's literally what this is. I'm going to step away from the mic for a sec. Each one of these little points would be a piece of information, a snippet of text, say. Let's say we're going to index a blog. Each point is not even necessarily a single blog post, maybe just a paragraph of text, maybe just a sentence. And each line represents a relationship between these little bits. So in a standard Drupal relational database, you get none of that, right? It's a table, you've got columns, you've got different tables that connect to each other, right? You do queries with views and it puts them all together and it renders the output. This is completely different. This is measuring relationships between different pieces of information. This is how the AI thinks. So what we need to do is we need to pull our information out of the relational database and put it into something that looks like this. Question, yes?
How does a vector database determine the relationship to, like,
How does it
words?
arrive to a...
How does a dog get related to mutt?
That's a great question. How does a dog get related to a mutt? How does the relational database help the AI figure out what are these relationships, what are these similarities, what's close to something else? And the answer is I can't give a good answer, but the answer I can give is it's math. And that's why it's literally a 3D. It's not even 3D. Some of these models you can use many dimensions, up to like 1,000 dimensions or more. But I'm just going to keep it in 3D. It's a 3D representation of whatever concepts you're trying to teach it, and so it knows dog is geographically close to mutt, so those two words are probably related. And they're both close to the word animal, so that, that might be related as well, and it draws these lines. So that's why I love this diagram, because it's literally what the computer is doing, is it's drawing lines. Yeah.
Does the AI do that, or does the Pinecone, the vector database provider, figure out how to do that?
That's Pinecone, and technically that's AI too. It's just a different
Right.
step. That's the embedding step. So yesterday in my talk, I actually have an open source script where you can take a CSV file and turn it into a vector database, which is also a CSV file. But the difference is it's got all these. It's literally just math, where you're just you're taking concepts and just finding these mathematical relationships between them. So yeah, that's about as good as I understand vector databases. So any other questions on this before we talk about how to use it? Beautiful. Okay, so go to pinecone.io, same drill, you get an API key, you set up an empty index on the Pinecone site. Here's some screenshots. It's very similar, very straightforward. You go to API keys, create one. Here's the screenshot of what that interface looks like. Give it a name. Now this part's important. You got to pay attention to what you're doing here. You don't have to pick the same options I did, but I recommend them, and here's why. Text embedding 3 large. This is the embedding model that the AI is going to use to convert your information into the vector database. And you have to make sure that this lines up with what you tell Drupal in a few minutes, right? So whatever you set here, just remember it at least, because when you configure Drupal, you have to tell Drupal, I set it up this way, so you should know that, all right? Same thing with the dimensions. I wrote down this number, 3,072 dimensions. By default, that's what Drupal consumes it at. So that's a good number to pick, but you have to specify when you're setting it up. And then down at the bottom, create index. You press the button, and then you have a database hosted on pinecone.io. Now, one more aside on this. The reason that you need a third party for this is because this is something that Pantheon, for example, or Acquia does not do. They don't do vector databases. So you can't host this on them. Pinecone.io does a great job of it. So there you go. So you get the API key from Pinecone.io. You go into Drupal. You install and enable the AIVB provider Pinecone module, which I told you about before. You clear your caches. Now you go, okay, here's the configure Pinecone screen up here in the corner. It's really simple. You basically just, what's the key? Use the key module. You can store it in config, which I don't recommend. You can store it in an environment variable, which I do recommend. The point is, get that API key into your Drupal system somehow, and then with the key module, and then that's it. You just select the key from the key module and click Save Configuration, and the Pinecone module in Drupal now knows what that connection is. Next step is Search API. I mentioned this before. This is what you need it for. Raise a hand if you used Search API before. All right, most people here. Great. So if you haven't, it's basically just a way of connecting Drupal to another search server. Usually you use it for actual, I'm doing a search query and I want to get a result. But in this case, what we're doing is we're defining the Pinecone vector database as a server, and then we're adding the index, which already exists on there. And then Drupal knows that the Pinecone database exists. And because of the connector module, it's able to send information to that database. One last step, and this is really important, so it has its own slide. You got to index your content. I'm seeing nods. I've made this mistake before. If you don't index your content, the damn thing doesn't work. Yeah, what's wrong? You spend hours debugging. Oh, wait, I never indexed my content. So you have to go to this page. You're viewing your index in Search API, and this blue line will actually be empty until you press this Index Now button. Right? Once you press that button, it starts a batch job. There's a nice progress bar, and when it's done, it might take a few minutes. It might take 5, 10, 20 minutes, depending on how much data you're indexing. because remember, it's not just indexing, it's embedding it in a vector database, right? So it's a bit of a more complicated procedure. It can take a few minutes, but when it's done, now you have all your stuff in a vector database. That's a really important step. Next step is the agent. We already set up the agent, so it's open API. I said I was going to use GPT-4o. Great. But Drupal needs to know about that, right? We haven't done that part yet. So let's do it. Go into Drupal admin to the AI module. There's a page for an AI assistant. You give it a name, a label, you give it instructions. Down here, you're going to want to check this box that says Enable RAG Actions. Raise your hands. Who knows what's a RAG? Oh, about half. Okay, great. Retrieval Augmented Generation. It's a big fancy term. You don't need to memorize it. There won't be a quiz. But what it means is exactly what we're doing. We're teaching the chatbot based on the content of our website so that it can answer questions based on that. It's not an all-purpose chatbot. That you could do in 5 minutes on Drupal, right? Just spin up a chatbot that can just answer questions. What's the weather? Are the Yankees a baseball team? Whatever, but if you want it to be trained on the content of your website, this is what you do, right? There's other options down there. You don't need to worry about most of them. The instructions box here is kind of key. You want to tell it something like, you're a friendly chatbot and you're trying to answer questions about X. The better of a job you do here, the better your chatbot will be. But I'll talk about that more in a minute. Other options, this is where it gets into the, I don't want to say complicated area, but this is where you have to be careful during your configuration. You pick your AI provider, which we already configured before. You pick your model, GPT-4o, max tokens, blah, 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 blah. You need to make sure, no, I don't have it screenshotted, but you need to make sure that the number of dimensions is the same as what you put in before, because if you have a different number of dimensions, then it's just going to have this mismatch and it won't be able to talk to the database correctly. All right, so far so good? Okay, so this is it. That's it. 2 pages of a config page in Drupal. You haven't written a single line of code yet, but we're getting there. So far so good. The next stop is the actual chatbot. We've got the agent, we've got the database, we've got these cloud providers, we've got our Drupal site running. All we need to do is put this one little front end piece on top to actually access all this stuff. All right? Block layout. Raise your hand if this does not look familiar. If you've used Drupal like ever, you probably know what blocks are. You probably recognize this page. Literally just go into structure, block layout, anywhere. You can literally put this in any region you want. It doesn't technically matter. My screenshot, I have it in header top left, which doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't matter because by default, the chatbot that comes with the AI module just pops up in the corner of your screen. So it doesn't matter where you try to put it on the page, it'll pop up in the corner of your screen. And if you scroll, it just hovers there, like a modern chatbot. And then if you click on it, it expands, and then you can type in it and do all the things. So you click Add Block, you get an option like this. The AI module is one thing that's still a little weird about it, because we're still in early days, is there's 2 options. There's the AI chatbot and the AI deep chat chatbot. To be honest, if somebody here actually understands what the difference is between those 2 things, I would love to know. What I do know is that the deep chat chatbot seems to work better. So that is the one I recommend using. If anybody has insight on that, I'd love, yes, please.
So the chatbot itself is going to be deprecated in version 2.0,
Okay.
so don't use it.
Don't use it.
Use the chatbot. Yeah.
Thank you. AI Assistant is the RAG we set up before. First message is just a greeting to the end user. You give it a name. None of these things really matter, but this is the form. And then save block. And when you click save, that's it. You now have a chatbot on your website. There's one more step, which I promised I would talk about. I mean, it's working. Now, you could stop now. But there's one more step which I highly recommend, and that is fine-tuning. What is fine-tuning? Fine-tuning is the act of taking that initial prompt, which you wrote in English, and rewriting it so that the AI chatbot understands better what you're really trying to do. Here's a good example of a chatbot that I set up where I didn't do any fine-tuning. And I told my friends about it, and they started pounding my chatbot with questions that it wasn't prepared to answer. Jordan doesn't know how to make an old-fashioned. Jordan doesn't know what a website is. I promise you, I know how to make an old-fashioned. It's one of my favorite cocktails. But the AI didn't know that. And so it just gave this awful answer. What's a better answer? Well, here's a better answer. Okay, I don't actually define what's a website in my blog, but I talk about the importance of having a website. A website should be a living, evolving entity that can change over time. If you're reading this, I'm a little embarrassed because it actually recommends WordPress, not Drupal. I don't know why I would do that. Yeah, I know. I'm getting shakes in my head. I'm getting people in the audience are giving me disapproving looks now. But yeah, so more fine-tuning would help with that, presumably. What does a good prompt look like? So here's a good prompt that I came up with, which is the one I use on my own website. Answer the question based on the context below, and if the question can't be answered, then try to suggest a similar topic that is available. And I did that because my chatbot on my own website, all it knows is the content of my blog, which, it's 15 years of technical blogging on Drupal-related topics. So it knows that, but that's it. It doesn't know how to make an old-fashioned. So if you ask it how to make an old-fashioned, what it should do is try to redirect you. What I want it to do is redirect you to a topic that it can answer, right? That's not the only way to do fine-tuning, but that's what I chose to do. It's a strategy. So that is my example of fine-tuning. I'll give one more. I was in a hackathon, one-day hackathon, and we had a team. Everybody on the team was technical except for the project manager. And so she asked us, how can I help? And I said, you're going to write the prompts. So she spent all day writing the prompts, fine-tuning the prompts. It's plain English. She doesn't know how to code. She doesn't need to. She's writing these prompts, and at the end of the day, we had a phenomenal prompt. It was better than what I could have come up with because she spent all day working on it. Phenomenal. So the point is, I said you didn't have to code, and this is what I mean by that. You do have to write a prompt, but it's plain English. You don't have to code. But it is an important step and something that worth doing. Put all these things together. This is it. This is what you end up with. It's just a screenshot. It's from one of the websites I worked on in the last year. It's got a greeting. It's got a text box at the bottom. You can type in questions, get answers. And that's it. That's how it works. What else could you do? I mean, we're only halfway into the hour. Stuff that I don't have slides for, but would be good next steps. Real content. I talked about this a bit yesterday. If you're doing a chatbot like this that relies on your content, it's only going to be as good as your content. So 15 years worth of blog posts is not bad, but it's not great. What would be better? Customer data from tens of thousands of customers, or telemetry data from car sensors, or, I mean, there's all, you want as much as you can possibly get your hands on. And that, of course, is what the big AI companies are doing, which lands them in a lot of hot water because sometimes they cross ethical lines. So, that's something to consider as well. But the point is, the more real data that you can get that's actually relevant to your use case, the better your chatbot's going to be. What else can we do? Different providers, Claude, Llama, Drupal recipe. We have one of those, but let's make it better. Let's make it ask questions and then actually do the configuration and not just install the modules, but actually go through all those config pages so that the human doesn't have to. That's all doable. Auto triggers for re-indexing new content. That's a problem with the Search API module, that when you create a new blog post, it doesn't automatically index it unless you've told it to, or unless you've set it up that way. So that's something that you could add. Environment variables, so you're not storing your secrets in the key module. Self-hosted vector database, LLMs, are becoming more and more of a thing. That would be very valuable if you care where your data goes. Something else, another great caveat that I didn't talk about at all, is that these AI companies that you share your data with may or may not leak it. They may or may not do it on purpose. Early versions of Copilot, you would just ask it questions like, what are Sony's trade secrets, and it would give you the answers. if you didn't work at Sony. And so it was really bad. There were some very high-profile cases early on of large corporations getting their secrets leaked through their use of Copilot. So that is one reason why you would want to host your own, because that way you can own the server, and your data goes from your server to your AI and then back again, and it never goes outside. If you care about such things, that's something else you could do. And then the last thing, it says come back tomorrow. I wouldn't try that because today's the last day of the conference. But it's going to be on YouTube in, I don't know how long, a few days, hopefully a week or two. My other talk on how to do this with headless Drupal, which is a lot more complicated. And the reason it's more complicated is because you don't have Drupal running everything. As soon as you add that decoupled element, what you have is other software running on another server stack or two in order to make this all work. Those are the only things that I wrote down in terms of like, what else would be fun to do with this? Where else could you, take this? Are there questions? Any questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
On the fine tuning, where does that go? And then secondly, could you fine tune, like say, so for the environmental organization, like, could I say, like, if people are asking about our policy, make sure to look at these pages.
Yes. Oh my God, that's such a great question. Okay, two questions there. The first one is, where does the fine tuning go? I'll just go right back here. It goes on this page right here under instructions. If the user asks questions about unpublished articles, make sure to add a status somewhere in the lookup, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, that's where it goes. And then over time, you keep coming back to this page and tweak it. It's really more of an art than a science, to be honest. And maybe a lot of this AI stuff is, but this is especially because how do you evaluate an answer, man? Right? You ask it a question, it has the information, it gives you an answer. If it's a decent answer, is that good enough? Do you want to keep working on it? Like, this is really qualitative, not quantitative. So, like I said, in some cases you get hilariously bad answers and you know that's wrong, and so you can work on that. But then at some point you just have to say, yeah, this is probably good enough for my purposes, right? So that's the fine tuning. And then the other question.
So like how could you
yes.
Be more specific? Like,
be more specific. There's a bit of an if-then in that question too, isn't there? If you're asking about a certain type of topic, look for the answer in a certain location. Yes, you can absolutely do that. In fact, the best way to do it is with multimodal agents, where you actually have different AIs set up. You have one that can orchestrate them all and say, aha, this is a question about regulations. I'm going to go ask the regulations bot and get an answer from it. Or this is a question about news. I'm going to go to the blog post and get answers from that, right? So that would be another great thing to set up. That is sort of beyond the... Actually, does anybody know, is it possible to set up a multimodal AI using the AI module, or would you have to set up some sort of separate orchestration layer?
There's different agents for different types of things. Yeah.
So you would just have to set up different chatbots, yeah, which is not ideal. In the world of AI, it is theoretically possible to set up one orchestration chatbot that would then use the others. That's not possible with the AI module yet. But anybody here with coding ability, if you want to take that on, I can put you in touch with Kristen Paul and get you some support to build that. But I mean, this is Drupal. This is the open source community. It's I was just working this morning on improving the recipe, so it would work with the keys module. I mean, this is how this works, right? Everybody just contributes what they can. But yeah, so that is beyond the current capabilities of the built-in model, unless you're writing your own, unless you know PHP pretty well. Any other questions? Yeah, one right here. I'll get to you.
I've played with the AI module. I haven't done the vector database stuff, and mostly the stuff that I've been using it for is like admin side of things and getting into like. So a thing I've run into is when I ask it questions about the site, it hallucinates because it doesn't know anything about the site. So I'm assuming you can do all of this stuff and add the vector database to it, and it would understand. Like, I guess the question in here is, I would like for the AI to understand the context of the site structure. Like, how the site is worked, like what things connect to what other things, what the config looks like, all of those things, so that when I ask it a question, because I'm a WordPress guy and I don't know anything about Drupal, then it can give me an answer and it actually knows what I'm talking about.
That's a great question. So first of all, to the WordPress user, welcome. Oh man, yeah, no, that's a tricky question. So the short answer is not really. It doesn't know your site structure.
Yeah.
You can tell it to, like, if you're exporting your config, with Drupal CEX, you can tell it to scan that directory and like pick up the config that you've saved. But then you have to sort of tell it to do that every time, because remember, generative AI doesn't really learn.
Right.
It already learned once, and now it has all that knowledge, like right, Eric, in its database, and then that's what it answers based on. And you can tell it to pick up context, but you have to keep telling it to refresh that context. So it's not quite the same as it knowing and understanding. It's a little harder for stuff like administrative tasks or even for coding. I asked the AI for help writing the recipe, and it said, sure, I can write a Drupal recipe that does X, Y, and Z, and it like spun up a module for me. That's not a recipe. It doesn't know what a recipe is. Those are YAML files. It doesn't know that because it didn't read the blog post. Recipes are a brand new thing in Drupal that the AI hasn't been trained on yet. So these are when you're coding and doing that kind of thing, these are the limitations. When you just hand it a bunch of content and say, please scan this and give me answers, it's better at that. A question in the back?
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Sorry. I'll get to you. Yes?
I was just wondering if you've tried using the vector database for just semantic search instead of chatbots or like
Yes. Yes. And it works really well at that.
Yeah.
And in fact, at work, we've discovered we have a whole like Drupal site filled with great content that's relevant to the people who visit the site. They don't want to read it. They only want to ask the chatbot the question. They don't want to search. They don't want to look at the index or read a book. They just want to ask the chatbot. That's how people prefer to use the website, which is weird, but maybe it's the shape of things to come. All right, you've been really patient in the front here. I appreciate it.
So actually, I have two
Yes.
questions that I think are completely separate. One is, like, let's say your site is a documentation site for a product, and you have a detailed prompt, but there are specific things that the chatbot is getting wrong.
Yeah.
So can you train it to say, this answer was wrong, this answer was right?
Not using this stack.
Like, you'd have to
Yeah.
go in and what, is that in that also in the vector database?
Well,
The information stored there?
there's things you can do. You can weight certain terms up or down and say, like, if somebody searches with this term, just ignore it, or searches, or certain pieces of content should rise higher, should bubble up. You can sort of put your thumb on the scale, as it were.
Is that the search API or?
Yes, using Search API, and in fact, you're just using the relational database, the built-in Drupal database. You can, assign weights to pieces of content. There's a add-on module for Search API that lets you do that kind of thing, and even add in little search terms like, this blog post that I just wrote. If somebody searches for a certain term, this should show up at the top of the list, kind of thing. So yeah, you can sort of mess with how it expects the results to get. And then the other thing is, back to the other question before, you can add if-then statements. If somebody asks about something in particular, be sure to give this specific answer. And you can write whole essays in that prompt of if this, then that, if this, then that, and like have it just sort of handle a bunch of different use cases. So that's about the closest you can get right now, just using this stack.
I got one more.
Yes, please. One more question.
So let's say you want to have a chatbot on your site that uses your site's information plus this other one that you don't have access to the back end for. So, like, I work for a university and someone wants to have their chatbot, but also information from this other website over there. So, like, if you're directly mucking with an AI and writing your own agent, like on one of those providers, you can probably do that, right? You can add instructions. So, how would that work on using this stack?
Yeah, okay, so I have two answers to that. So, okay, the question is, if you have two different websites worth of content and one chatbot, and you only have access to the content on one of those sites, how do you get the chatbot to answer questions from both websites? Using this stack, that would be tricky. There are a couple things I can offer. So the first one is, this is what we did at work, is we actually had an outside team that wrote the chatbot and then just handed us a JavaScript. It's not even a widget, it's literally just the JavaScript, and said, just load this JavaScript file and run it on your website whenever anybody wants the chatbot. And so we do, and then a little icon appears in the corner, and you can click on it, and it expands and does the whole thing. But we didn't even use the AI module for that. It literally just like raw JavaScript, minified, stick it in the head of your HTML, and it runs. So that's one option is, if you've got multiple teams working with stuff, you can just sort of have an external chatbot embedded on your own site. That's one answer. Another answer is see if you can get access to their content. Maybe they have an RSS feed. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Maybe they have an RSS feed that you can pull from, or maybe if they're also Drupal, you can get them to install something like the JSON API module, which it just lets you make queries against their site very quickly and efficiently, and you get back a big JSON object, which the AI loves to consume. You could, take an object like that, or a CSV file, even, to any kind of export, and upload that to your vector database. And so now you have one or two vector databases with all the information in there.
So if you're building it, like say on your website, you would have your module that checks their JSON API feed
Yeah.
on time scale and then pulls that into what, 2 different vector databases?
Oh man, that's getting complicated. Maybe 2, or maybe you try to combine it into 1. You could do something like the feeds module, which it's a very old module. I think even still in Drupal core, the feeds module. But there used to be this module that would actually just like read RSS feeds and then create create nodes in your Drupal site based on that feed. So now you own the content. That's sort of a heavy solution for what you're describing, but I mean that's another alternative. So yeah, there are ways of pulling information into Drupal and then packaging that and sending it to the vector database. But yeah, you basically need 1 or 2 AI agents that have access to both sets of content. Any other questions? That's a really good question. You guys are keeping me on my toes. Any other questions, good or bad? Doesn't have to be on that level.
Does the Pinecone have the same charge
Yes, it does. It's they actually, I believe, have a free tier. I don't know how small it is, but it's the same. I think they actually charge for storage in addition to queries, but it depends what level you're at and how much you've paid for it, blah blah blah. But I don't want to put it on the board here, but I would have to check. I've honestly, I don't know if I've ever gotten a bill from Pinecone for the work that I've used them for. They're very cheap for the level I'm using them at. Good question. Any more? Yes, one more.
You had mentioned paying $10 a month for
OpenAI.
Like what sort of context in terms of?
Okay, so what do you get from OpenAI for $10 a month? You get all you can eat access to their API key. So or keys. So like I said, when you go into their site, you give yourself a key. Stick that in your site, you can now make queries. How many queries do I get? That I'll pull up for you guys. That I don't mind showing you. Let's look at, here we go. That's not, I need to get into their backend, but this is a good, all right, so here's chatgpt.com, ready when you are. Okay, how do I, here we go. Wait, no. What is it, dashboard dot something? Dashboard dot, is it open? Yeah, I don't know. Something. Oh god, what's the? I don't remember. What? How do you get to the OpenAI.com backend? A profile. Okay. Oh, login. There we go. I'm not logged in. Okay. API platform. There we go. All right. This will just take a sec. And where is it? It's down. No, it's not. It's dashboard. There it is. That's what I was looking for. API usage. So yeah, in the last, let's just say last 30 days, so it'll give me my September budget. We're almost at the end of September, and I've used a little over $8 so far in the month of September for all this work. It's still loading the total spend, but you can see there's all these different, it breaks it down, chat completions, images, image generation. I've actually done a lot more image generation than that. I don't know why it's not showing up. Moderation, embeddings. Embeddings is when you take your data and send it to the vector database. That's embedding. Yeah, here we go. Here's the chart. Like, the most I spent in a single day was like $1.67 for however many queries I got that day. It'll show me, but it doesn't matter. Oh yeah, okay. So 133,000 input tokens in the last 30 days, 89 requests. So yeah, it measures it by tokens. More modern LLMs take more tokens to get an answer, but they theoretically give you a better answer too. So it kind of depends, which model you want to use, how many tokens per request, how many requests you're getting, what the traffic on your site is, right? That kind of thing. If you're getting the same request over and over, you can work on caching. It really depends on your volume.
There's also a breakdown. Like there's a pricing page where they have the breakdown for the different models too. I can't remember where that is.
Yeah, it's in here somewhere.
But you can actually see side by side like what the difference per token or per 100 or whatever number of tokens is for GPT-5 or GPT-4o, and you can see there's a big freaking difference between those two things.
Yeah.
Which is why 4o it's like good enough and without having to spend significant multitudes of more.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat that for the microphone, and in case anybody else didn't quite pick that up. Older models that aren't quite as sophisticated take a lot fewer tokens to run per query. So if you're doing a lot of queries, something like 4o, which was last year's model, might be good enough, and it's going to be a lot cheaper. So, there's trade-offs, but, you can tweak that pretty effectively. Any other questions? You guys want to get out of here? It's just about time anyways. All right. Thank you.